Well, I remember when I first got my first credit card. And somebody I talked to, the wisdom they gave me is they said, use this thing like you would a debit card. Because the difference between a credit card and a debit card is a credit card will let you spend money you don't have. A debit card will say, hey, you're out of money, you can't spend anymore. It's plastic cash. And I remember I took it, I was like, that's great advice. And I took the credit card and I went and bought some groceries and then I went and bought some clothes and I went and bought a couple things online. I thought to myself, but man, I think I'm doing good. I think I used it like I would a debit card. And then that bill came in and I had spent $1,000 over what I intended to spend. And I didn't have $1,000, I don't think, in my bank account to begin with, let alone $1,000 over. And that's where it really started to dawn on me, is that I need to learn how to spend money better. And that's what this whole session is about. Session 3 is learning how to spend righteously. We've been in this Money Matters e-series. We're so glad that you are walking through this with us. That our goal is to provide accessible resources to disciple people further in the stewarding of their finances in the kingdom and for the glory of God. We believe that we are most like God when we are generous because God is a generous God. And we believe we are called to be givers in a give me world. We gave an introductory session. The last session, session 2, was about giving faithfully. It's by far our longest one, so I hear you on that. If for whatever reason you haven't watched the first 2 or the second one, I would ask you to please pause this one and go watch that second one because it sets a foundation for where we're headed today and next week. So we've been talking about learning how to give faithfully, talking about spending righteously, and then our next session will be on investing wisely. In our intro video, I talked about the difference between being rich and having wealth. Being rich is all about how much money you make. It's about the money that comes into your pocket, your salary. Being rich is about how much money you make. But being wealthy is how much money you keep and the investment you make with that money. That there are a lot of people in this world who are rich, they make a lot of money, but they are not wealthy because they live paycheck to paycheck or even sometimes spend more than what they actually make. And quite possibly, I've known a lot of people who are not rich by the world's standards or by the standards of some of their peers, but they are extraordinarily joyful. They are wealthy. They are rich towards God. And I believe that learning how to spend righteously is a fundamental step in not just being able to give faithfully, but creating bandwidth as well to invest wisely. But before we get too far, there's a good chance that I think you might not be aware of how rich that you are. The fact that you can actually pull this up is a sign that you have a richness that is maybe not to the same as the rest of the world. Because being rich is often a subjective term to us. We oftentimes think of someone who is rich as just basically anybody who has more money than we have. That if I make $20,000, somebody who's rich is somebody who makes 30. If I make $3 million, somebody who's actually rich is somebody who makes 30 million. You see what I mean? 71% of the world, though, get this, lives on less than $10 a day. 70% of the world lives on this per day. That they say is that if you have the ability to go to a bank account and just even pull out cash, it puts you in the top 5% of wealth in the entire world. Isn't that wild to consider? The fact that you have the ability to even pull out cash says that you are in the top 5 wealthiest people in the entire top 5% of the wealthiest people in the entire world. They say that the average American actually lives not on $10, not on $30, but on $165 a day. If you have options for food, if you have options for clothing, if you have the ability to put gas in a vehicle to get around, you are rich by the world's standards. So let's just do some basic math. That $165 a day, 365 days a year, means that's $60,000. Now you might be thinking that's a good amount of money. And I would say that's a good amount of money. But isn't that interesting that $60,000 is what the average person spends or attempts to spend, an American, in a year, and yet the median income for us as Americans is $40,000. Now, I'm not a mathematician, I'm a pastor, I'm not super good with numbers, but I'm pretty sure that $60,000 is more than $40,000. That's probably a reason why they say that the average American household has over $5,000 in credit card debt. What does this mean? And this is the sad truth, is that on average, we spend more money than actually what comes into our hands. It's a sad truth, I think, for many of us. Perhaps for you watching this. That's the whole reason you're watching this, because you have come to the reality that is the truth for your life, and you want help in practical tools to get out of it, which that's what this is designed to do, is that we spend more money than what actually comes into our hands. And when we are spending more money than we actually have, it doesn't help us. It hurts us. It creates stress. It creates anxiety. It creates self-worth issues. It creates comparison that isn't healthy for our emotional state or our relationships. Frankly, friends, it is a problem if we don't learn how to spend righteously. You know, financial guru Dave Ramsey, he puts it this way, one of his most famous phrases is that we buy things we don't need with money we don't have to impress people that we don't even like. Jesus says it this way in Matthew chapter 6, verses 19 through 21. He says, "Don't store up for yourselves treasures on earth, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." So why is this important? This whole idea of spending righteously. And I believe it's that, is if we don't learn how to spend righteously, then giving faithfully or investing wisely will never be an option for us. You know, maybe there's that time in which there's a sermon that compelled you to give. Or maybe there was an opportunity to meet a need with somebody in your community. And you want to give. I want to give to the church. I want to give to the cause. I want to help out that person. But we don't. We freeze. Because on the inside, we knew that, well, we just overdrew on the bank account a few days ago. So there's no way I can do that. Or the student loans and the car payment and the rent and the mortgage and the credit card debt and the taxes and the bills and all of that's coming in. And we got to eat, and groceries aren't cheap. We all know that. And so we table this concept of giving and investing because we don't think we have the option or the ability to. We tell ourselves, I just don't make enough money to give. And my challenge to you is that it could very well be not that you don't make enough money to give. In fact, I would say you do make enough money to be generous with your life. It could be that you actually just have a spending problem. Friends, let me tell you, having a spending problem is not honoring to God. That is finding contentment. It is trying to find joy in things in this life. It is storing up treasure here on earth where moth and rust destroy. It is not storing up treasure in heaven. And we want to help you shift that. Because if you're anything like me, money can cause a lot of stress. It can cause a lot of tension in a marriage or in a relationship. And so before we run to, well, Eric, I don't make enough money to give faithfully or to invest wisely, let's pause and honestly ask ourselves this question. Am I spending righteously? Have I learned how to spend, how to budget money righteously in a way that it matches the heart of God so that I can be generous, so that I can invest, so that I can save, and so that I, most importantly, am not consumed by the things of this world. Look what the psalmist says in Psalm 62, verse 10. It says, "Do not trust in extortion or put vain hope in stolen goods. Though your riches increase, do not set your heart on them." If you want any verse to commit to memory of what does it mean to learn to spend righteously, take this verse. Take Psalm 62, verse 10. Even just that last portion. "Though your riches increase, do not set your heart on them." My guess is that for many of us is that when giving is discussed, we think about making more or getting more instead of giving more. We think about, well, how do I maintain my lifestyle and figure out a way to do that at the same time too? Like the last time maybe you got that first paycheck, or the last time you got a raise or a promotion. What was the first thing that came across your mind? Was it, man, I can be more generous? Or did you think, man, I can level up? I can get a new car. Even though I don't need it, I can upgrade that car. Or we can renovate that thing in the house. And that's not bad, that's not wrong. But what was the first thought? What's your first thought? What's my first thought when there's an increase that comes our way? I'm not saying you like need to sell your home and go live in a hut on the other side of the world. But what if we began to say, man, what are ways that I can learn to spend righteously so that I can live more into the stewardship of finances that God has for me? That instead of going to Starbucks every single day, I'm going to commit to making my coffee at home. And that $5 over and over and over again makes a difference. Or that instead of eating out 5 times a week, I'm going to commit to just doing it once or twice. Because that extra $40, $50, $60 every single time is going to help me learn how to spend righteously. I think for a lot of us, we just need to adjust our heart when it comes to our spending. That spending doesn't make you more content. It makes you more of a slave to that which you are spending for. Because remember, what you and I have, it is not ours. The Bible is chock full of so many passages. Things like Psalm chapter 24, verse 11, how everything in the world belongs to the Lord. It's not your money. It's not my money. It feels like it. We've earned it, but it's all God's. God's the one who's given us those brains. He's the one who keeps us alive. He pumps air into our lungs. He's given me the hands to be able to work with. He's given me the shrewdness to make decisions. All of this is because I am alive, because He is a big blessing and generous to me. And so therefore, that house, that car, that stuff, that paycheck, it is not mine. It is all a result of His generosity to me. That's kind of just my reminder to us all. Remember, we would do well to remember this, is that God owns it all. Maybe another way to think about it is what if your view of money was not, how much of my money do I get to spend? Rather, how much of His money does He allow me to be a steward of for myself? You see, when we begin by honoring God with our wealth, we begin to see things differently. We recognize that all we have and all we are is from God and not ourselves. So one of the biggest ways for us to learn to spend righteously is by creating and sticking to a budget as a tool. Simply put, is budgets are your friend. Now, the word budget might be a 4-letter word to you. It might sound, too constricting or it's unnecessary. I don't need a budget. But remember, if you want to be wealthy, if you want to give faithfully, if you want to invest wisely, it's about how much money you keep and the investments you're able to make. Because a disciplined life of finances allows us to respond to generosity in a way that honors and respects God. You see, what a budget is simply this. A budget is telling your money just where to go. That's why budgets are your friend. That every dollar has a job, and if you're not telling it where to go, it will manage itself. I remember growing up, I had a lot of chores to do around the house, and my mom was super gracious to give me $50 a month as an allowance. And then when I turned 16, there was a rule in our house is that we had to pay for half of everything related to like our car. So I had to pay for half of the first truck I bought. I had to pay for half of my insurance, but I also had to pay for everything else. I had to pay for all of my gas. If I wanted to go out to eat with friends, I had to pay for that myself. And so what did that mean? It meant I needed to get a job. In order for me to have a truck, to be able to go spend time with friends, that freedom that we crave when we're 16 years old, I had to make money. I remember getting my first ever paycheck at the frozen yogurt shop that I worked at when I was 16. I came home with $178. Woo, baby. I thought I was rolling it. I was pumped. I took it to the bank. I cashed it, and I held that $178 in my hand. And I was excited for this reason, is because I wanted to upgrade the stereo in my small little Toyota Tacoma pickup. And I thought to myself, looking at that $178, I need about $300. Like, this is great. It's going to take me 2 paychecks in order to do this. I'll be bumping around, riding in style in no time. And then the tax man came around, aka Mom, and said, hey, by the way, that time of the month, here's what you owe me for insurance. Here's what you owe me on this. And I learned very quickly that if I didn't learn how to spend righteously, I would be out of cash real quick. You see, that's why a budget is important. It's because it's telling our money where it needs to go and what is the priority. Believe it or not, over half of the households operate without a budget. And that means you're not only probably living paycheck to paycheck, You have little grasp on how to save, how to invest, and most importantly, probably very little opportunity to understand how you are called to give faithfully. And with that being the case, that's where credit cards get swiped. That's why our interest adds up. We dig ourselves deeper into a financial hole that we cannot get out of. And it compounds things like worry or fear, or that argument with your spouse continues to happen over and over and over again, instead of finding the joy of compound saving or giving or investing. Look at some of these proverbs that talk about the power of learning how to spend righteously. Proverbs chapter 21, verse 5 and verse 20. Verse 5 says, "The plans of the diligent lead to profit, as surely as haste leads to poverty." Verse 20 says this, is "The wise store up choice food and olive oil, but fools gulp theirs down." So let me just share with you, if you're going, what does even a budget even look like in the first place? At the end of this video, there's actually a way that you can fill out some things, and we've created a budget worksheet for you to follow along with because we wanted to provide that free tool and resource for you. But a basic budget is simply this. When you think about the money that comes your way, and chances are you probably want to think about it after the tax man gets here, the actual tax man, not my mom, the IRS. A basic budget framework is this kind of general rule of thumb to start with, is 10, 10, and then 80. I give 10%, I save 10%, and I live on 80. Now I know for a lot of us, when we're starting in our budgeting process, learning to live on 80% is very difficult. Learning to save 10% is not in the cards. That we're not even giving yet, so jumping to 10% giving is going to be a stretch. But 10, 10, 80 is a great framework. A lot of people will tell you, actually, the lower you can get that last number to live on at the least amount as possible and to raise those first two numbers up is the best way to manage our finances. And we always start with the giving faithfully. That was the lesson what we talked about last time as an act of worship. And trust me, is that if you don't start with it, if you don't budget your tithe, it's not going to happen. We must make it the first thing we put down in our budget if we desire to honor God with our lives. Again, 10% might be the goal. It is the standard in which we are called to, but starting somewhere, 0.5%, 1%, 4%, and slowly working that up is a way to honor God with our finances. The next step is learning how to save 10%. And I would venture to guess if you're not saving, I'm going to tell you, start saving something and start now. Did you know, think about this, look at this, is that if you saved $1, I think I have $1 in here. If you saved and you put $1 into a savings account at age 21, into a retirement account, it is worth $88 by the time you're 65. Think about that. $1 becomes $88 at the age of 21 in a retirement account. If you just wait 9 years, so if you say, well, I got time, I'm going to wait till I'm 30 to start saving and investing, this $1, just 9 years later, isn't worth $80, it's worth $64. And that's why we need to learn how to start saving for our future, saving now. And then last, we need to learn or to reset, to learn to live on 80%. And I think this is where a lot of us need to make adjustments. And that's where tracking everything becomes so important. We need to track our rent or our mortgage, our gas, our grocery, our bills. Everything needs to be tracked. Even things that happen annually, that don't happen every month. Premiums for health insurance or car registrations, right? That $150-something that comes your way once a year and you completely forgot about. Having an amount for expenditures, even for things like hobbies or clothes or eating out. Just making sure that every dollar has a job. Because here's the heart of the matter. Here's the heart of the matter for you and I. Is that there is nothing wrong with having stuff. But it is foolish to let our stuff have us. There's nothing wrong with having stuff, with making money, with having a budget, with saving, investing. There's nothing wrong with it, but it is foolish to let your stuff have you. You know that they say that the average person who wins the lottery, these people who win these millions of dollars in Powerball or the state lotteries, they end up broke oftentimes within 18 months. Why? It's because they did not learn how to spend righteously. A lot of us think, well, if somebody gave me just magically $10 million, $100 million, even if it's a smaller lottery, if I just won 100 grand, man, there's no way I would just blow it all away. But chances are, if we haven't learned how to spend righteously, then there's a chance it's going to catch up with us eventually. So like Jesus says in Matthew chapter 6, verse 24, he says, no one can serve two masters. Either you will hate one and love the other, or you will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. That if we don't learn to mind our money will mind us. Because at the end of the day, when it comes down to spending money, spending decisions are spiritual decisions. That every time you swipe that card, every time you pay in cash, every time you go out to eat, every time you go to the grocery store, you are making a spiritual decision because it is a bigger picture of a pie in which we are making things a priority. So I'm not saying don't take a vacation. Taking vacations isn't bad. But do you take out extra to go on vacation? And that comes at the expense of some animosity later on. Or do you go on a vacation, but then you don't give because you go on vacation? I'm not saying you can't buy a new vehicle, but do you have to get a new one? Or would buying a used one be more sufficient and more within your bandwidth to give you more peace of mind with those finances? I'm not saying to not upgrade your phone. I mean, frankly, they make it seem like we have to at times. But is it actually necessary? Or do you want to upgrade your phone just because you can? Just because you got that email? Hey, those 2 years are up. Do you want to sign a new contract? Spending decisions become spiritual decisions when we view everything we have as God's. And so the goal of spending righteously is to live within margin, not to keep up with the Joneses. Let me say that again. Is that spending righteously is to live within our means, to live within margin, not to keep up with everybody else around us. So here's a couple quick practicals as I wrap up this session on spending righteously. Number one is to track every dollar you spend. If you don't track every dollar you spend, you have no idea where it's going. You ever been in one of those seasons where you just look at your bank account after a few months and you realize you've been spending money on a subscription you thought you canceled? Or you completely forgot to cancel after the 30-day trial. You're not even using it, but it's been drawing $25 out of your bank account every month. You ever been there before? That's why it's important to track every dollar you spend. And there's a lot of good ways to do it. Maybe your bank account, actually, you can go online and you can assign things to it specifically. There's other apps like EveryDollar, You Need a Budget, YNAB, Mint, or Rocket Money that allow you to do this really easily and effectively. But we need to, at first and foremost, trust me, you need to be tracking every dollar that you spend. Spit out reports. Don't lose sleep over it, but be very aware of where your money is going. Number two is what I say is create a 24-hour rule. Create a 24-hour rule. And what that is wait 24 hours before making a big purchase. Because it gives us time to frame it up like this. What's the 24-hour rule? Well, it gives you time to think, do I need it? Do I really need it? Do I need it now? Do I need it at this price? And do I have something like it already? And would a used one suffice? Create a 24-hour rule when it comes to a big purchase. Now, I don't know what a big purchase might be for you. Maybe it's a car. Maybe it's an appliance. Maybe it's a TV or something. I don't know. Whatever it might be, give yourself a rule to say, I'm going to take 24 hours to think this through. Do I need it? Do I really need it? Do I need it now at this price? Do I have something like it that already suffices? Or is there a way to get a used one that would do the trick? Principle number 3 is what I call the 3X principle. I forget where I heard this first, so I can't give them credit. I would love to. But when I'm looking to purchase something, the 3X principle says, could I buy this thing 3 times without overextending my bank account? Could I buy this thing 3 times without overextending myself? That soda on the way home? Sure. You can probably buy that 3 times without extending yourself. But if you're a golfer, buying a new driver, or do I need to get a new couch? Why? Just because. I don't know. Could I buy it 3 times and feel comfortable and not overextend myself? I don't know. It's for you to determine, but using that 3X principle helps us to really focus on whether or not that is something we actually need. Leads me to number 4, and I'll wrap up with this, is this kind of progression to give, live, save, or debt, and then spend. Give, live, save, spend. This is the order that I was taught to think about money as with a mentor. That when I make the budget and the money comes in, I give first. It's non-negotiable. Next, what do I need to live on? And the emphasis there is need to live on. My fixed expenditures, the things I have to do in order to survive or provide for my family. Then I save. I either save money and or pay down my debts. I put my money there next so I can get out of debt as fast as I can. And then I can spend. I can enjoy what's left. So I hope this has been helpful for you, learning how to spend righteously. As I mentioned earlier, there's a budget worksheet that we would love for you to take. If you've never made a budget, you can fill that in, and there's some helpful categories for you to begin thinking about where your money is going. Additionally, as you work through the notes and the reflection questions, if at any point you would love to talk to somebody from our church or somebody who's maybe wise with finances, please, please, please reach out to us, and we'd love to help you on this journey of making your money matter better, faster to the kingdom of God. Thanks, and we'll see you for session 4.